This is the Fair Fight Initiative. We're working our way component by component through the broken criminal and justice system, and we've arrived at prison, which people might sort of understand as a faster step than the way we've gotten here. But when you talk about arrest and cash bail and plea agreements and jail and sentencing and probation, prison is a long way down the road from there, but an important component of the ways the unfair system is wielded against certain people. David Utter.
The American prison system is essentially, in a lot of states, a gulag. It is a series of structures that hold up to thousands of people. Our biggest prison, I think Angola in Louisiana, is 5,000 people. The majority black, especially when compared to the percentage of black people in the population. I think Angola's 80 or 90% black men, even though black people only make up 30% of Louisiana's population. And the problem is that, you know, the judge that sentences, the prosecutor that argues for the law and prison system, they think that they're just putting somebody away and that's that. They're just not allowed out in the community. The reality is they're put in places that are incredibly violent, that are creating traumatized people, and in many instances, killing people. I think of our client Ladarius Payne, young man in Alabama, one of the country's most notoriously dangerous prison systems. It's run by gangs. The guards have virtually no control over the dorms, and that allows violence to happen, including what happened to Ladarius, got stabbed multiple times and had to be airlifted out of the prison. It was discovered, or what we've discovered in that case is that, you know, what happened is there's just not enough guards, they're not trained well enough, and they ignore threats of violence to people, and that's, you know, the result is people get stabbed, get hurt, and in many cases die. Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, incredibly violent, dangerous prison systems where the notion of cruel and unusual punishment, the promise in our Eighth Amendment to the Constitution that people shall not be subject to cruel and unusual punishment, is a complete fallacy. America's prisons are a shame, a blight, and it's worth becoming aware of and acting, including donating to places like the Fair Fight Initiative, where we are able to hire lawyers to defend people's civil rights in prisons.
David, you've talked about how this system is wielded most unfairly against black men. We've talked about the deplorable conditions that our society tolerates. But I know that probably the biggest reason society tolerates the horrible conditions America's prisons present to people who are incarcerated there is because of the natural human tendency of out of sight, out of mind. But what you and I, of course, both know is that the overwhelming majority of people who serve time in prison get out of prison. And if we reframe the issue of our prisons around what good is it for our society to quote unquote punish people by traumatizing them in these environments, when all we're going to do at the end, in 8 or 9 times out of 10, is reintroduce them into our communities.
Well, that's a great point, and it goes to the violence and the degrading conditions in the vast majority of America's prisons, and the trauma that inflicts on people who are imprisoned. And it's not as if we also then provide extensive mental health care to people once they're released. They're often released traumatized, broke, and undereducated, virtually left to fend for themselves, as opposed to really getting the start they need so that they don't reoffend. In a perfect world, there would be lawyers in every city available to defend people whose civil rights have been violated in America's prisons. That perfect world doesn't exist. We need to file more lawsuits challenging the conditions of confinement in these places. We need to defend more incarcerated people to bring more justice and, stop this incredible blight on our country.
We would all like to romanticize the idea of civil rights attorneys being there to protect our rights. But in so many cases, the financial incentives are not there. And that's why the Fair Fight Initiative exists. Crowdsourcing donations to get reputable, experienced lawyers to represent cases that can make systemic change without the need for a financial incentive. Keep reading through our broken system to understand how these pieces fit together.